Good evening, good evening, good evening. Woo, woo. Y'all know how to get my recording going. Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to the Stephanie Humphrey channel and the Stephanie Humphrey broadcast. Welcome to Sip and Say with Stephanie. How y'all doing? How are you all doing? So look, y'all, I just want to go ahead and let you know right now that this is actually a recording. It's live on your end. I'm actually recording it right now because I am with my class tonight. And so I was unable to come on live, but I still wanted you to see my beautiful face tonight and hear my lovely voice tonight and give you the information as we continue to talk about elections. And so tonight I'm going to talk about the three branches of government. I know last week I mentioned I was going to talk about the Electoral College, which I will mention the Electoral College tonight, but I wanted to talk about the three branches of government tonight. And so that's what we're going to talk. I'm going to try to be short and sweet. And I will check in with you all tonight. I'll say, hey, when the live recording is going on. But yes, for my YouTube listeners, I am not live tonight. For my podcast listeners, you're listening to me at normal time, 10 p.m. or whatever time you might be listening in after 10 p.m. So welcome to everybody. How y'all doing? Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, socially. I am doing great right now. All is well. I cannot complain at all. Look, I have some things to complain about, but I'm not even going to touch them. I'm not even going to complain. I am thankful. I'm grateful. I'm happy. I'm excited. I do have some things that are going on. This has been a difficult month, y'all. It has been a difficult month. It has been a difficult month. So far, it's the 17th. No, today's the 18th. Today is September 18th, and it has been, these 18 days have been difficult. I've had to navigate some things emotionally and navigate some things mentally, and navigate some things spiritually, and it did not feel good at all. It has not felt good. I'm still navigating through a few things, and I know I'm going to come out victorious. It's just a matter of learning the lessons that I need to learn as I'm navigating the new season. And so that's how I'm doing. So overall, I'm doing wonderful, thankful, grateful. But just to let you know, for the month, it has been a month. Let me tell you. We have also experienced some deaths in our family. My dad's family, extended family, well, not extended family, my dad's family has experienced at least one death, and there's another family member that's not doing well. And so it's been difficult this month. Not just that, but just like my personal things happening. It's been a month, but God is still good. God is still on his throne. God is still absolutely amazing and powerful and in charge of all things. And so despite the tests and the trials and the difficulties and the deaths, which are truly inevitable with life, God remains faithful to me and to my family. And so for that, I am grateful. Let me go ahead and get into, what y'all sipping on tonight? So I was sipping on tea earlier, and right now I'm sipping on straight water, y'all. I'm going to take a sip. So go ahead and drop it in the chat and let me know what you are sipping on. I am again sipping on water. I was gonna sip on some more tea, but I was like, well, I'll just go and drink my tea this morning, and I have my water right now. And so yeah, let me know if you're listening to the rebroadcast what you are sipping on as you are listening in. So I'm gonna start with the executive branch of government. You all know that we have three branches of government: the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. And so I'm going to give us some more information, because if you, like me, civics was a long time ago. And we may need a refresher. And it's okay, you all. It's okay for us to need a refresher. If we forget any information that we learned in school, the beautiful thing is that we have the internet, we have books at the local library and online or wherever you get your books to re-educate us about what is going on in our world, re-educate us about history, about civics, about whatever it is, American government, American Revolution, Reconstruction, like whatever we need to learn about, there is material available for us to learn, to relearn, to get re-educated, to get a refresher about what we need to know or be reminded of. And so tonight is our refresher, okay? It's our refresher about the three branches of government. So I'm going to start with the executive branch. So we know that the executive, I don't want to start with the executive branch. I really don't. I'm actually going to start with the legislative branch. I'm going to do the executive branch last. I'm going to do the legislative branch first. Then I'm going to get to the judicial branch, and then I'll get to the executive branch. Okay. So the legislative branch, as we know or are reminded of right now, is Congress. It is our about to say our legislators, but it's our legislators. What I really want to say is our United States House of Representatives, and it is our senators. So our legislators make up the legislation. Where do I want to start? All right, so this is a good place to start. So the Article 1 of the Constitution actually established the legislative branch. It is which our legislators, the House of Representatives, and our senators make up Congress. They are the ones who enact the laws in our world, in the United States of America. So the House of Representatives is made up of 435 electors, elected members. All 435 seats of the House are up for election or re-election this year. So pay attention to the races that are happening in your state so that you know the individuals that are running for these seats or are running for re-election, so that you can vote in the best candidate for that representative seat in your state, okay? Vice President Kamala Harris, she is going to need members of Congress that will help her get some legislation passed that benefits a majority of, if not all, Americans. And so we need to make sure that we get the right people in place, okay? All right, y'all. And so pay attention to the races that are happening in your state. So the 435 elected members, there are 6 non-voting members. And I actually was reminded of this during the Democratic National Convention. I didn't watch all of the Republican National Convention. I watched bits and pieces of it. And so I'm pretty sure these non-voting members were there as well. But I did note them because I was like writing down all of the, of course, the 50 states and all of the non-voting areas within the United States of America, just to see how many votes Vice President Kamala Harris received to be nominated as a Democratic candidate for, or to be nominated as a presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. And so I may have to go back and look at the Republican Party because I'm curious to know what Donald Trump's numbers look like as well. But anywho, we have our 50 states, of course, and then our 6 non-voting members represent the District of Columbia, which it should be a state. I think they are fighting to get that done now. The Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and these American territories, which include the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, and the American Samoa and Guam. Okay, so that's 4. Let me say it again. American Samoa, Guam, the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay, so as we are reminded, the presiding officer of the chamber is the Speaker of the House. The United States Representatives has the Speaker of the House. They're actually third in line. If something were to happen to the president or something were to happen to the vice president, the Speaker of the House is the next person in succession to run the country. And so just keep that in mind. So members of the House are elected every 2 years. I actually like the way they have the Senate seat set up, but the House members are elected every 2 years. The requirements to run for candidacy for a U.S. representative is you must be a resident of the state, not necessarily a resident of that district, but a resident of the state. You must be 25 years of age, and you must be a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years. It's so interesting that the individual that is running for a candidate for the US House doesn't have to be a member of the particular district that they are running to represent. I find that very, very interesting. I'll have to do some more research about why that is. But just as long as they're a resident of the state, 25 years, citizen for at least 7 years, okay? So the House of Representatives has the power to initiate revenue bills, to elect the president in the case of an electoral college tie, and they have the ability to impeach federal officials. Okay, so those are just some of the powers that have been assigned to the House of Representatives. Okay, the other branch, or not necessarily branch, but the other part of Congress is our Senate, our senators or Senate. So Senate makes up 100 senators, 2 senators from each state. And so make sure that you know if it is time for the senators in your state to be reelected. And if so, I hope you know who they are. But if you don't, do your research, do your due diligence to find out who they are, what is their history, what is their platform, and how they can best support, so that you can make a decision about who is best to support your state. And so I like the way that the U.S. Senate has their elections, because they are elected. So U.S. senators, let me see, hold on, just a push pause. The the U.S. House of Representatives, let's see. So they have a 2 year, term. And so senators actually have a 6 year term. And I like the way they have it set up, because the senator terms are staggered, so that about 1/3 of the Senate is up for reelection every 2 years. I like that because it gives you some longevity for some of the senators that are there. And then it gives opportunity for new senators to run for those seats and to potentially become a senator of your state, to join Congress and help lead our country with laws and things of that nature. And so I like the way that they have that staggered elections for senators. Qualifications for a U.S. senator is you must be a U.S. citizen for at least 9 years, you must be 30 years of age, and you must be a resident of the state that you represent. I'm wondering, do you have to be a resident of the state for a certain amount of years? I didn't think about that when I was doing my research, but I'm wondering, for example, if I moved to New York today, could I run for U.S. Senate? Or is there like a waiting period for that? I'm just curious. And that's something I'm going to have to do that research, just so I can be educated for myself. And you do the research so you can be educated for yourself, to see if you have to be a resident a certain amount of years. U.S. citizen for 9 years, but a resident of the state, I'm not quite sure about that. So, anywho, actually, prior to the ratification of the 17th Amendment in 1913, senators were chosen by state legislators. But with that ratification, now senators are chosen by popular vote. And I like that. I like that senators and U.S. House of Representatives and other elected officials are elected to represent our local government, which we're going to talk about that tonight too, and to represent our state, okay? And of course, the presidency. All right, so let's see what else we have to say about Congress. All right, so the Senate has a sole power to confirm the president's appointments that require consent. For example, the United States Supreme Court of the United States Supreme Court of the United States. Let me say it correctly. The Supreme Court of the United States, the justices that serve on the Supreme Court of the United States were all appointed by the president of that time, but they must be confirmed by the Senate. That's why we have the Senate confirmation hearings for the justices. Like in my lifetime, we've had 4 of them appointed, 3 under Trump and 1 under President Biden. And there could have been some of the other justices could have been appointed in my lifetime. I just don't know. In my adult lifetime, I do remember the 3 and the 1. And so they, again, are appointed by the president, justices, as well as some other, appointments, but I know the Supreme Court justices, and then confirmed by Senate. They have the sole power to confirm the appointments by the president in some of the leadership positions. They also have the sole power to provide advice and consent to ratify treaties. I'm not going to say the sole power for that one, but they do have the power to provide advice and consent to ratify treaties. And I think they do have the sole power, actually, now that I'm re-looking at my notes. They have the sole power to do that as well. Exceptions to those rules is that the House must also approve appointments to the vice presidency, and any treaty that involves foreign trade, the House is involved with approving those treaties. The Senate also tries impeachment cases for federal officials that are referred to it by the House of Representatives. All right, as we think about the process of legislation and the introduction of bills, it is important for what is my schoolhouse rock? I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. Yes, bills can actually sit on Capitol Hill for years, for months, for weeks, for months, for years, and not be approved or eventually be approved, whatever the process is through Congress. But let's talk about it. Anybody can write a bill. I can write a bill. You can write a bill. All God's children can write a bill, but bills can only be introduced by members of Congress. Okay. So if I want a bill passed for education, which is my passion, I write a bill. I would need to talk to my House of Representatives or my senators to introduce that legislation to Congress. Okay. Yes. So anybody could write the bill. Members of Congress introduce the bills. Now, the president does introduce the federal budget. Okay. So that is a bill that he does introduce to Congress. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about it. After being introduced, a bill is referred to the appropriate committee for review. It's important for us to know that there are 17 Senate committees with 70 subcommittees. There are 23 House committees with 104 subcommittees. And I want us to know that these subcommittees are not set in stone. Okay, so those numbers could change, added to or taken away from based on who's president at the time, based on the needs of Congress, based on whatever's going on. Those numbers, those subcommittees and regular committees could vary. Okay, each committee oversees a specific policy area, and the subcommittees take on the more specialized policy areas. Okay. For example, the House Committee on Ways and Means includes subcommittees on social security and trade. Okay. So that's just one example. So once that bill is introduced into the subcommittee, they have the ability to accept it, to reject it, or to amend it. I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. So that subcommittee has the ability, again, to accept it, to reject it, or to amend it. If they decide to keep this particular bill, they do move it forward to the full committee. And then the process is repeated all over again. That our full committee has the ability to accept, reject, or amend. Okay. Throughout the process of a bill being introduced and being, looked at, talked about, discussed, that it let me get my back to my place. The committees and the subcommittees, they hold hearings to investigate whether this bill is good for our country, it's not good for our country. They actually have experts that come in, they have advocates that come in, even opponents to the bills that come in to join these hearings to give information to Congress about whether this bill should be passed, or why it should be passed, rather, or why it shouldn't be passed. Okay, so these individuals talk in favor of or in denial of whatever the bill is that Congress is considering passing. They give the pros and the cons, the good and the bad of the bill. And again, let's see. And it is important to note that the individuals that Congress wants to call to the hearing, like, again, these experts, these advocates, these opponents, if they choose not to come, Congress can subpoena them to come. So just keep that in mind. If you're an expert, Senate asks you to come, U.S. House asks you to come, and you say no, they can subpoena you. I pray that I will never have to go. I guess it's a good thing because it means that you're an expert in your particular field, or you are passionate or have the education experience on a particular subject as it relates to the bill. So it's a good thing to be called to be a witness, to share testimony. But child, I do remember when I don't remember the two surviving members of the Greenwood Black Wall Street, but I do remember at the time it was three living members. It was the siblings. I wish I had their name right away. They actually went to Congress to talk about why they should be compensated, receive reparations, be compensated for the destruction of their community at that time. And so I didn't listen to the hearings, the full hearings, but I did catch some of the hearings of the sister and brother. I don't have their names right now. I hadn't planned to talk about it, and I don't have their names in my memory, so I apologize for that. But you can actually look it up. The brother, if I'm not mistaken, the brother has since passed away, and his sister is still living, and there's another, I'm gonna say, young lady that's living. If I'm not mistaken, both of those ladies are over 100, either close to. I know the sister is over 100, and the other young lady, I believe that she is as well. And so I don't remember, or I don't have information about the update for. I do know Congress denied it's not an appeal, but they did deny their case. Their case was denied. I don't know I don't know where it is in the appeal process, or if it's already happened. I don't have an update for that because I hadn't again planned to talk about it. But you all can do that research for yourself to see where the Greenwood case is. But that's just an example of a hearing when you're asked to come before Congress, because a bill is put forth. You come to Congress to testify for or against, and to share, eyewitness testimony or your education, your experience concerning whatever bill has been introduced, and they are discussing whether to pass or not pass. I know that was a lot. All right, y'all. So if the full committee decides to approve the bill, it is reported to the floor of both the Senate and the House. Let me see. It takes, let me say this. The majority party leader, they decide when the bill is put on the calendar for discussion in both chambers, okay? It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month, it could be longer, okay? Now, if the bill that is introduced is of an urgent matter, then it is likely that the leader of that chamber will go ahead and put it on the calendar so that both houses, both chambers, the House and the Senate, can discuss whatever that bill is so that it can get passed or not passed, but so that the discussion can go ahead and happen to determine if that bill needs to be pushed through and approved by both chambers. Okay, so they do have the discretion to the leader of that house, or the leader of the committee. Let me make sure I'm saying it right. Yeah, the majority party leader has the ability to determine when that bill is going to come up for discussion on their Senate or House floor. All right, y'all. So when the bill comes up for consideration, the House actually has a very structured debate process as it relates to the discussion on the bills. Okay. Each member who wants to speak, they are only given a few minutes to present whatever it is they desire to present in their chamber. The number of amendments are also limited, and the kind of amendments are also limited. So that is a guidance in the House, okay? Now in the Senate, child, I don't know if you've ever listened. I don't think I've ever listened to any Senate debates. Actually, excuse me. I don't think I've ever listened to any House debates that I can recall. Not at this moment, I can't recall any House debates that I've listened to, but I have listened to them Senate debates, and they can get crazy. And Z. You hear what I'm saying? So this on the Senate floor, they can debate on bills. Their time frame is unlimited in debating bills. Child, the Senate need to have some guidance. They need to take a guidance or look at the model of the House and have some stronger guidelines. But you can debate a bill on the Senate floor for however long that senator or those senators want to debate it. Okay, they may speak on other issues, like while they have they've been given the right to speak, or the approval to speak, because you got to do things in order. Even though it seems out of order sometimes, that you still do things in order. So as the senators are presenting whatever information that they have or whatever they want to say about the particular bill that is being discussed, they actually can introduce amendments. They can actually speak on other issues not related to the bill. They can offer amendments to the bill or introduce amendments to the bill as well. I think they just have free reign to do whatever the heck they want to do in the Senate as it relates to bill discussion, because that's what we're talking about. Senators can also use the filibuster, child, to delay bills. That's what happened to the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. Let me see if I got the whole name. The John R. Lewis Voting Rights the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2021. Filibuster, doggone it. And so filibuster is a delay in my opinion. Well, actually, in truth, it's a delay of the vote. It is a delay of the vote. They use whatever conversations they want to have on the Senate floor to delay the vote. And so that's what the filibuster is. And let me make sure I got everything right on that. So, yep, the filibuster is a procedure by which a senator delays a vote on a bill. And really, it's really delaying the approval or the passage of that particular bill, which is absolutely ridiculous. But there is such a thing, you all, as called invoking cloture. CLOTURE. That means that a senator can break the filibuster by ending the debate and forcing a vote. Okay, so they can break the filibuster by ending the debate and forcing a vote. Once the debate is over, the votes of a simple majority pass the bill. Oh my gosh, the Senate debates can get absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that they can talk about whatever the heck they want to talk about, even if it's unrelated to the bill, that's crazy. Like, I feel like Senate rules need to be changed. I don't know what it takes to introduce governance changes, or change the governance of the Senate, change the laws of how the Senate is governed. I can't say. I really don't know that part. So if you know, I will take that education. Please drop it in the live chat or drop it in the comment section later. I will take that education. I told you I'm getting re-educated even right now. And so I don't know what it takes to introduce new governance in Senate, but I think it's ridiculous that they can talk about whatever they want to talk about, even though the specific conversation that's happening right now is on this bill. I don't feel like talking about the bill. I want to talk about my grandchildren right now. So doggone it, that's what I'm gonna do in my time frame. It's ridiculous. Okay. Anywho, a bill must pass both houses of Congress before it goes to the president for consideration. All right, y'all. So when a bill from Congress gets to the president, the president has a couple of options. Okay, the president can sign that bill so that it becomes law. That's one option. If that does happen, if the president signs a bill, like I said, it becomes law. That bill is then printed in the statutes at large. Okay, so everybody know this is a new law that Congress has approved and the president has signed. We have this new law. I'm so excited that some things are going to happen when Vice President Harris becomes President Harris. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm trying to be bipartisan, so let me stay focused. If the president believes, so the president can sign it into law. If the president does not like that particular bill, then they have the right to veto that bill. Okay, they can veto it. Congress can actually override the veto with a 2/3 vote in each chamber. So 2/3 votes in the House, 2/3 votes in the Senate. Okay, if Congress overrides the veto, then the bill becomes law and it is printed in the statutes at large. So, president can sign or veto. The president also has the option to not take any action on a bill. Okay, he or she can take no action on the bill. So the Congress is in session and the president takes no action within 2 days, not 2 days, 10, within 10 days, TEN 10 days, that bill becomes a law. Okay. Now, if Congress adjourns before the 10 days are up and the president takes no action, then the bill dies. And if Congress wants that bill to pass or go back through the chambers, then they have to reintroduce it as if it is a brand new bill and they have to go through the process all over again. So those are the options that the President of the United States has as it relates to bills. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the additional powers that Congress has. All right. So Congress has the ability or the authority to establish an annual budget for our government. Okay. Congress can levy taxes, have tariffs for trade. They, have the ability to do that in order to undergird the budget. Like if we don't have enough money, they can, use the taxes, not taxes, but the tariffs and the taxes. Yeah, I said, all right, levy taxes and tariffs in order to do that. They can also borrow the money if they so choose to do that, to make sure that the budget is balanced. Let me see if I want to say anything else about budget. So Congress does mandate spending for specific items. They earmark money for specific funds or projects that need to happen. So they can earmark money for specific funds for a particular project. They have the ability to do that. Make sure I got everything. All right. Okay, so let's go here. So that's the entire Congress. Make sure. Okay, so there is such a thing as the government oversight. Okay. Also, I do want us to know that Congress holds the sole power to declare war. Okay, so if we go to war, it is because Congress says that we can go to war. Okay, so the Oversight Committee. The oversight of the executive branch is an important congressional check on the president's power and a balance against his or her discretion in implementing laws and making regulations. So we understand and we are thankful for the presidential role, but Congress really has, I feel like Congress has more power than the president in some respects, especially as it relates to introducing legislation and getting bills passed. They do have the power to do that. But they are the oversight committee for the president to make sure that the president does not become a dictator and doing his or her own thing. All right. And so anything else I want to say? The primary way that Congress conducts oversights is through hearings. Okay, so there is a House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform and the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. Both of these committees, or both of these committees, both of these committees, they listen to hearings, they oversee any reform concerning the government, concerning operations, policies. They oversee those particular areas and have hearings to determine, if the government is running like it should, if the president is doing what he should be doing or she should be doing. And so that is what the executive branch does. I think it is important for us to note that Congress maintains an investigative organization called the Government Accountability Office. It was founded in 1921, and they are the ones that, let's see, this is the original mission. So the original mission for this particular office, which used to be called the General Accounting Office, their original mission was to audit budgets and financial statements sent to Congress by the Secretary of the Treasurer and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. But today, the Government Accountability Office, they audit and they generate reports on every aspect of government, okay, including our tax dollars, to make sure that Congress is spending our tax dollars in the way that they should be spending them, in the way that's best beneficial for the American people. Last thing that I would like to say is that the executive branch polices itself through 64 inspectors general. Each of them are responsible for a different agency, okay? They have regular audits and reports that are attached to these agencies that they are over, okay? All right, I think that's enough information on the executive branch. If anybody is listening and wants to add more information, if I forgot anything or left anything out, please let us know in the live chat or in the comment section if you're listening a little bit later. I want to talk next about the judicial branch of government. Yes, the judicial branch of government. So Article 3 of the Constitution has established the judicial branch of government. So this article actually gives Congress quite a bit of authority to shape and structure our federal judiciary, y'all, our judges, our courts, including the Supreme Court. So our Constitution grants Congress, make sure I got everything before I say this. All right. So the Constitution grants Congress the ability or the power to establish courts that are inferior to the Supreme Court. So that's where we get our lower courts from our appellate courts, all of those courts, because Congress has established them. I do want us to note that the Supreme Court, so they like I mentioned earlier, they have the ability to confirm, or they have the power. Part of their power is to confirm Supreme Court justices of the United States. And so I did find it interesting. I knew that the court used to be smaller, but I just didn't have the data for that. So the Supreme Court justice has had 6 members before, and it was in 1869 when 9 justices were appointed to the court, and it's been 9 ever since. So we have, the Chief Justice, and then we have the 8 other justices. I know that there has been some calls for President Biden to expand the courts. He has not done it thus far, and I don't think he'll do it before he ends his presidency. I don't know if the next president of the United States will expand the court or not, but they have the ability to make that recommendation, and then Congress can, I guess, determine whether they want to approve or deny. And I don't know what that process looks like. Like, how do you expand the courts? I have not done that research. That's actually some research I'm going to have to do. And I may do it to add to the information that I'll give you next week. We'll see what happens. Okay. So the Constitution grants Congress the power to establish courts inferior to the Supreme Court. Congress has established the district courts. They are the ones that try most of the federal cases, okay? They try most federal cases. There are actually 13 courts of appeals, and they review the appealed cases from the district courts. So, federal judges, y'all, federal judges, they can actually be impeached. Let me see. So federal judges can actually be removed or impeached by the House, but it must be approved by the Senate, okay? Judges and justices, they do not have a fixed term. They serve either until they resign, if they happen to be impeached for misconduct or unethical whatever, rulings or unethical behavior or whatever other guidance is there for impeachment, or if they of course pass away. Those are the only ways that they can, they'll be removed: conviction, passing away, or they decide to resign, which is very interesting, y'all. That's why it's important. Elections matter. That's why it's important that we get the right people in place, the right president in place, because they appoint judges. Our presidents, not presidents with an S, but our president has the ability to appoint judges. And then, of course, for the Supreme Court, they make the nomination, and then they're approved by Senate. Okay, let me keep going. So Congress determines the jurisdiction of federal courts. For example, if there are two states that have a case, or two U.S. states that have a case, the federal courts would actually hear that particular case, and then if it's needed, if that case needs to go to the Supreme Court, it will go there. Okay, so the courts only try actual cases and controversies. Okay, so in order to go before our courts, a party must show that it has been harmed in some kind of way. Okay, it has been harmed in some kind of way. That is the only way that suit or that case can be brought to our courts. Federal courts have the sole power to interpret the law, determine the constitutionality of the law, and to apply the Constitution in those individual cases. Okay. Just like the Senate has the ability to, or Congress, Senate and House, Congress has the ability to subpoena individuals. The federal courts have the ability to subpoena individuals in order to hear the cases and get as much information as they can so they can make an informed decision about that particular case. So you can be subpoenaed to go to our federal courts, okay, to provide, testimony, and then, of course, for evidence to be presented. So if a decision by the courts, the lower courts, go to the federal courts, or not to the federal courts, let me say that again. If the cases by the lower courts go to the Supreme Court, then the lower courts or the federal courts or the lower courts, like the appellate courts and all that. Let me make sure I said that right. Yeah, I'm just going to stick with the lower courts. If the lower courts, if the case goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court rules on that particular case, then that ruling must be upheld by federal courts and the other lower courts, okay? I believe it's called the appellate courts, but the inferior courts is a heading for all the lower courts that are not the Supreme Court. Or the inferior courts are all the courts that are not the Supreme Court. I should say it like that. And so once the Supreme Court makes a decision, the lower courts have to abide by that particular decision. Once they set that precedent, it must be followed. Okay, so I think that's all I have to say about that. We know that the Supreme Court of the United States is the highest court of the land. Basically, what they say goes. Okay, basically what they say goes. I think oh no. Okay, I already mentioned that. Okay, I got it here twice. All right, so got that. We know that Supreme Court justices are nominated by the president. The Senate confirms or denies them. And the last four that have been recommended by the president at that time, they were actually confirmed by Congress. As we know, the justices are appointed. They don't run for office. It is thought that the fact that Supreme Court justices are not elected officials or they don't run for office, they are not attached to a particular party, it's thought that that will keep them kind of covered or keep them neutral in a sense when they are judging on cases. Okay. I have thoughts about that, but we're just going to leave that there. Because we see, regardless of the thought of them remaining bipartisan, politics has truly been on the Supreme Court. We have seen it in the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the Dobbs decision. We have seen it in whatever else I can't think of right now, because that's the most recent case I can think about right now. Oh, we've seen it in the affirmative action being removed, in particular as it relates to college campuses and using race as a criteria for application within our college systems or our colleges. So we've seen it happen there. That overturning of affirmative action essentially is what it was. Roe versus Wade, Dobbs decision, child. So I understand the concept and I understand the reasoning behind judges being appointed and not politics not getting in, but child, that has not worked in my estimation. Okay. As we think about the Supreme Court, their task is to interpret the meaning of a law, decide whether a law is relevant to a particular set of facts, or to rule on how a law should be applied, okay? And again, the lower courts are obligated to follow whatever the Supreme Court has said. As far as the Supreme Court is concerned, they do not have to hear, like, even though you present a case or want a case to go to the Supreme Court, it does not mean that case will reach the Supreme Court, okay? The Supreme Court does not hear appeals. But parties, if parties want their case to go before the Supreme Court, they must petition the court, okay? They must petition the court, okay? And then the court has the right to determine whether they want to receive that particular case or not. It does take 4 justices of the 9 to determine whether that particular case will go before the court, the Supreme Court. And so, yeah, it takes 4 of the 9 to determine if the Supreme Court justice will hear that case. It has been noted that approximately 7,500 cases are filed for the writ of certiorari. I meant to find the pronunciation for this, but the writ of cert is certiorari. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not. I'll look. In fact, I'm gonna add it to the chat right now so that you all can see it for yourself. But the writ of cert, that's when you petition the court. It's called the writ of cert or the writ of the certiorari. Y'all, I should not be laughing because I really should know this. It's probably really sad that I don't know how to pronounce this, but I have never heard of this until now. I did know that parties could present their cases to be heard by the Supreme Court, but I didn't know that it had a phrase attached to it. So forgive my ignorance. And if you know how to pronounce it, then you won't be able to tell me because I can't hear you. But I am actually going to learn how to pronounce this word, and I may be able to pronounce it for you on next week. In the meantime, so y'all shaking your head at me, pardon my ignorance in not knowing how to pronounce that word. And so again, you petition the court, they can grant the cert. And then they will hear your case. Okay, so with the 7,500 cases that are presented to the Supreme Court, only about 100, fewer than 150 are actually heard by the Supreme Court. Now, if it's a case that they deem pretty urgent or something that really does need to be discussed or determined by their court, the Supreme Court, then the justices will go ahead and take that particular case. Okay. And so make sure I got all that together. Yeah. So let me give you an example. Like the Dobbs decision was important enough, or the Dobbs decision, the overturning Roe versus Wade, that was enough for the Supreme Court to hear that case again and for them to rule the way that they ruled. And then the affirmative action case was enough for them to go ahead and take that case and it be ruled upon. Another example of the Supreme Court actually taking cases is if two or more federal courts of appeals have ruled differently on the same question as it relates to federal law, then that case will more than likely go before the Supreme Court. They will actually hear that case and make a ruling on the discrepancies I'm not going to say discrepancies, but just a difference in ruling. Not necessarily a discrepancy, but just a difference in ruling. The Supreme Court will hear that particular case and determine what the ruling should be. And again, the federal courts, the lower courts will have to abide by that particular ruling. The justices, when they hear cases, they accept the legal briefs from all parties involved in that particular case. They will also accept the information from the quote unquote friends of the court, the amicus curiae, CURIAE. They will take that information as well, or briefs from the friends of the court as well. This can include individuals in academia. This can include individuals in industry trade groups or individuals from industry trade groups. It could actually be the United States government itself. Okay, so those are all considered briefs from friends of the court, and it's in quotations, friends of the court. I don't really understand what all of that means, but I'm just giving us the information so I can continue to do research to understand it, and you can as well, okay? Before issuing the ruling, the Supreme Court does hear the oral arguments. And, I'm thinking of the case about Greenwood that actually has gone before the Supreme Court as well. I'm looking at the brother right now who took the case to the Supreme Court, and I cannot call his name, but I see his face right now. Yes, I'll have to add his name to the chat. Let me write it down so that you can do. I'm coming back to Greenwood, and so maybe we do need to do some. I need to do some research about that right now. He is so passionate, this lawyer. I really like him, but like him as far as his passion for helping the individuals on Greenwood and his passion for the law as it relates to them. And so I'll put that information in the description so that you can read it for yourself or research it yourself if you want to. Okay. So I do understand legal briefs. So the legal briefs are presented before the Supreme Court. They hear the oral arguments. They also take, we have the oral arguments, additional arguments. The justices have ability to ask questions of the parties that are involved. They have the ability to ask the questions, that gain more information. So again, they take all of the information, the briefs, the oral arguments, the answers of the questions that they have, take all that information, and they help them make an informed decision about what needs to happen in that particular case. So after the justices gather all of this information, they hold private discussions or private conferences. They discuss the information that has been presented before them, and they make a ruling on the case. Okay, this can take up to several months for them to make a ruling, sometimes, weeks, but up to several months for them to make a ruling on that particular case. Okay. The ruling comes forth as the court's opinion. And then for any of the justices that didn't agree, they can provide a dissent for the decision that the Supreme Court has made. The dissent is called dissenting arguments or dissent. I do want us to note that if a particular case that comes before the Supreme Court, if that case involves the federal government, then the Solicitor General of the United States, they are the one that presents the arguments to the Supreme Court on behalf of the U.S. government. So just so we have that information. Last thing, or there are a few more things I want to say about the judicial branch. Let's see, the court's opinion. All right, so I do want to say this because this is important for us to know if we didn't know. Article 3 of the Constitution of the United States, it does grant every person the right to a speedy trial, you all, a speedy trial. It guarantees the right of every person accused of wrongdoing that they have a right to a fair trial before a competent judge and a jury of one's peers. So let me say that again. So the right to a speedy trial, I do know that that's in the Constitution. I don't know if it's under Article 3. So I need to double check that. I need to fact check myself, and I'll add it to the comment section, or I'll add it to the description. But Article 3 of the Constitution of the United States guarantees that every person accused of wrongdoing has the right to a fair trial before a competent judge and a jury of one's peers, okay? So a person is guaranteed, hold on, let me read this right. Okay, yes. So every person is guaranteed the right. Let me read it how it's written so I can say it right. So there is a guarantee that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay. We do have a right to a speedy trial by an impartial jury. We have the right to cross-examine witnesses and to call witnesses in order to support our particular case. We have the right to legal representation. We have the right to avoid self-incrimination, Fifth Amendment. We have protection against excessive bail and fines and cruel and unusual punishment, okay? There is also protection against being tried twice, okay? It's called double jeopardy. I saw the movie so many years ago. So if you have been convicted of a crime, you cannot be convicted of that crime again. Think if I want to say anything else about that. I think that's all I want to say about that. I do want to talk a little bit about civil cases, okay? So civil cases, do I want to say anything about criminal cases? I will say this, just in case we don't know. Criminal proceedings can be conducted under either federal law or state law, depending on the extent of that particular crime or depending on the nature of the crime. So depending on the law, state laws, federal laws, nature, extent of the crime will determine where that particular case goes, okay? I think that's all I want to say about that. I do want to say this. So once if a person is arrested, determine whether it's going to go to state, whether it's going to be under state law or under federal law, whichever way it goes. The defendant is given enough time to review all the evidence in the case. So hopefully the attorney general or the defense attorney. Hold on, let me get my terminology right. Anyway, regardless, the defendant it has to be given enough time to review all the evidence in a case, okay? So that they can build a legal argument for that particular case. Then the case is brought before either a judge or a jury of peers of that defendant's peers. It is important to know, okay, that's in civil cases. I'm getting the two mixed up a little bit. So that's in civil cases. Okay, so let me stick with the federal cases. The defendant has enough time to review everything. The case is brought to trial and decided upon by a jury. So let me get out of civil cases for a minute, because I guess I remember that a little bit better than the federal cases. So the defendant is given enough time to review all the evidence. The case is brought to trial and it is decided upon by a jury, okay? If the defendant is determined not guilty, then the charges are dismissed, okay? Otherwise, the judge is the one that determines the sentencing for that particular crime, okay? The fine for that particular guilty verdict, they determine the fine, they determine prison time, they determine whether that person is going to be executed or not. All of that is determined by the judge. So judges matter, elections matter, because it does determine those judges who are ruling on cases that relate to our individuals in our community. And I know if they commit a crime, I know we don't want to consider them citizens in our community, but they remain citizens of the community. And then if they're found guilty, of course, they become wards of the state. Not wards of the state, but they, go to jail or prison or are executed or whatever the case may be. So that's all for federal cases. So let me get into civil cases. So civil cases, when two or more parties bring disputes about, or let me say it like this, civil cases deal with disputes between organizations or individuals, okay? So if I believe that I'm wrong, I can bring a civil case against whoever has wronged me or whoever I believe has wronged me, okay? Suits are filed in civil court in order for the wrong to be potentially remedied, okay? So the civil courts can determine whether that person has standing to bring the case and the ruling is, given to them, or either there is no standing and that case is dismissed. One thing about civil cases is parties can waive their right to a jury, okay? So they can waive the right for a jury to hear their case. And if that is the case, then the judge will decide on the ruling in that particular civil case, okay? So if a jury rules on the case and they get to decide if damages will be awarded and how much those damages will be. If it's a case of, if the civil case is seeking damages, which I think most civil cases have a monetary value attached to it. Individuals are seeking money or some type of recompense for the wrong that has been done against them. Normally it's money. And if the jury or the jury gets to determine if money should be awarded and how much that amount should be. So in civil cases, just like in criminal cases, evidence is gathered and presented, and then either the judge or the jury make the determination if the evidence is enough for them to provide a remedy to the harmed parties, or if the case should be dismissed. Okay. And in civil cases and criminal cases, of course, you have a right to appeal. Okay. So if you and your lawyer determine that maybe something wasn't done right in the case, or the ruling is unfair, or something unethical was done as it related to the ruling, then you can appeal. The Federal Court of Appeals or the state appellate court, that's where I get my appellate from, or the state appellate court, they will hear those cases, okay? If the litigant files an appeal, they must show that the trial court or whatever the administrative agency was, that they actually made a legal error that affected the outcome of the case. And again, they must present evidence to support that claim. An appellate court makes a decision based on the record of the case established by the trial court or agency. Okay. They do not receive additional information. They take the information that was already presented, the record of the case already presented, and they make their determination based on that already presented evidence. Let's see. And then again, they make the determination whether to uphold the ruling of the lower court or to make a different ruling. So if a case continues appeal and it goes to federal court of appeals, then that determination is made by a panel of 3 judges. Okay, 3 judges. They again take the evidence, take the information that was presented. The appellant or the person who is going to the court for appeals, they have the right to present their legal argument to the panel, present with the written document, which is called a brief. They present the brief to this panel of judges, and then the judges make the determination whether to uphold what the lower court said, or if they determine that an error has been made, then they can reverse the lower court's decision. Now, of course, the party that's defending against the appeal, they also have the right to present their briefs to determine if the trial court decision was correct, or, well, actually, they present information to say that the trial court's decision was correct. And there's not enough evidence for the federal court to overturn what the trial court has already ruled on. Okay. So that's what the party defending the appeal, that's what they are doing, or defending against the appeal, right? Defending against the appeal, that's what they are doing. Okay. So the briefs are filed, and again, depending on what that panel of 3 judges decide, will determine if the ruling of the lower court stands or if it's overturned. Let's see. The Court of Appeals, they usually have the final say in the cases that come before them. Okay. It is possible that the Court of Appeals will send the case back to the trial court for additional proceedings. That could happen. But if that does not happen, then again, the word of the Court of Appeals is final. Lastly, if the litigant, if they are not happy with the federal court decision, the lower court decision, no court decision, they can appeal to the Supreme Court. All right. And again, the writ of cert will help the Supreme Court to determine, if they're going to take it or if they're going to not take it. Okay. So that is all for the judicial branch. I know that was a lot, but let's get into the executive branch. Okay. So this is the last branch that I'm going to talk about. And then I think I might give us some information, or I might do state and local government next week. Okay. I think I might do that next week, along with the Electoral College. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll do that next week. So let me talk about the executive branch. So the executive branch includes our president, our vice president, and the president's cabinet, and all of his secretaries of state and education, and all of those individuals make up the executive branch. Okay. So the president of the United States is the head of the state, or the United States of America. They are the head of state. They are the head of government. They are the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Okay. So the president of the United States is responsible for the execution and enforcement of the laws that Congress has created. There are 15 executive departments within the executive branch, and each of those members are appointed, or each of those leaders, I should say, members, I had it right the first time. Each of those members are appointed by the president. Okay. Let me say that again. Let me say it right. So forget what I just said. Let me say it again. There are 15 executive departments. Each are led by an appointed member of the president's cabinet. Okay, each of them are an appointed member of the president's cabinet. Okay, they carry out the daily administration of our government. These 15 departments are joined by the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, those two heads are not a part of the cabinet, but they are under the authority of the president. The president also appoints the heads of more than 50 independent offices, or independent federal commissions, rather. Two examples of those is the Securities and the Exchange Commission, which deal with our money, and the Federal Reserve Board. The president also, again, appoints our federal judges, as was mentioned previously. They appoint ambassadors, and they also appoint individuals of other federal offices. Federal Reserve, Securities, and dealing with our money. The executive office of the president consists of the staff who immediately serve the president. Okay, one of such entity is the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Okay, they are part of the executive office of the president. We've already mentioned that the president has the power to sign legislation into law when it is presented to him or her by Congress. The executive branch of our government conducts diplomacy with other nations, and the president does have the power to negotiate and sign treaties. Senate has the power to ratify those treaties. The president also has the power to issue executive orders, and they have the power to extend pardons for individuals of federal crimes. Okay, they can pardon or provide clemency to individuals that have committed federal crimes. According to the Constitution, the president must, from time to time, give to the Congress information of the state of the union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. It is important for us to note that the president can fulfill this constitutional requirement in any way that he or she deems fit. But we do know that the State of the Union is the way that presidents present that information to Congress, which I think is a smart way to present it, because it's not, that information is not only presented to Congress, but it is available for all the American people and all the free world to see what that president is planning to do for that particular year of their presidency. So the State of the Union occurs in January of each year, except the inaugural year. Okay, so inaugural year, there's not a State of the Union, but it happens every January of the presidency outside of that inaugural year. See if I want to mention anything else. Okay, so in order to become president of the United States of America, you must be 35 years of age, you must be a natural born citizen of the United States, and you must have been here or lived here in the United States for at least 14 years. It's interesting to note that while we do vote for the president, the presidency is decided by the Electoral College, which I'm going to give us details, information about the Electoral College next week. Okay, next week. So I do want to note about the Electoral College that the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November of every fourth year, which is when we vote for president, the people elect members of the Electoral College. And those numbers are proportionate to the 50 states. So we have 2 senators in each of our states. And so we have one electoral college member, one for each member of each congressional district, which is usually two senators. The District of Columbia, they actually receive 3 votes in the electoral college. Okay. The electors of the electoral college, they cast votes for the president. And currently we have 538 electors in the electoral college. Okay. And again, I'll give us probably that same information and a little bit more information next week. Presidential terms are limited to for a year. You get 4 years in your term, and you get to serve for no more than 2 terms. Okay, it's interesting to note that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he is the only president of the United States that served multiple terms, because there was a time in our history that there were not term limits on the presidency. It wasn't until, let's see, an amendment to the Constitution was ratified in 1951, which establishes presidential term limits. But actually, FDR was elected 4 times to be president from 1932 until 1945 when he passed away. And again, he's the only president in the history of the United States that served more than 2 terms. And unless that changes, he will be the only president that has served more than 2 terms in our history. All right. And so the vice president of the United States of America serves at the will of the president. You know, he or she serves at the will of the president. Okay. Their primary responsibility is to take charge of the presidency in the event that something happens to the president. If he or she becomes incapacitated, if they pass away, if they resign, if they are discharged from their duties as president, then the vice president will step in the place of the president. Vice President Harris had to do that one time. I think not Vice President, but President Joe Biden, I feel like he had a medical procedure done, and Vice President Harris had to step in as president during that time to make sure that the country continued to run smoothly. So temporarily, we're able to call her President Harris, but technically she was still vice president, but she did serve the American people as president in that short time. Just like the president, the vice president is voted on by the people, because it's a 2-person party ticket, but they are actually voted through the Electoral College as well. I should say affirmed or confirmed, not affirmed, but confirmed, or elected by the Electoral College. Okay, let's say it like that. Let's just keep it right. I'm making up my own rules. So the vice president is elected along with the president by the Electoral College. Fact check myself. Let me get it right. Say it right. So I don't think I mentioned this when I talked about the legislative branch, but the vice president, if there is a split tie in the Senate, the vice president of the United States makes a deciding vote. So it's a 50-50 yay and nay, 50 yays, 50 nays. Then the vice president of the United States, they make the deciding vote. Anything else I want to say about this? Oh, I do want us to know, in case we didn't know, that there was a time where electors only voted for the president. And then the person who received the second greatest number of votes, they became vice president. But the ratification of the 12th Amendment in 1804 ratification determined that electors will vote for the vice president as well. All right. So before second with the person with the second highest votes, they became vice president. But since 1804, electors actually vote for president and vice president. Anything else I want to say about that? Yeah, I think that's all I would like to say about that. So that's all I want to say about the president and the vice president of the United States. It does give some more information about them, but if you want to know more about where they live and everything like that, you can do that research for yourself. I do want to talk a little bit about the executive office of the president. And so the president is provided support through the executive office of the president. Okay, this particular office was established in 1939 with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so the executive office, the individuals in the executive office, they are responsible for providing a range of tasks for the president, including communicating his message to the American people, also promoting trade interests abroad. So they do both of those things and a whole lot more to support the president. And the executive office of the president is overseen by the White House chief of staff. Okay. When I think about the White House chief of staff, my mind immediately goes to the TV show Scandal and how that went for the White House chief of staff. That was a mess. But anywho, the White House chief of staff, they oversee the individuals in the executive office of the president. All right. Senate confirmation is required for some of the advisors to the president. For example, the director of the Office of Management and Budget must be confirmed by Senate. Most of the other advisors are appointed by the president himself or herself. I think the most widely known individual in the office or in the executive office of the president is the Speaker of the House, not the Speaker of the House, but the press secretary. The White House Communications Office and the press secretary's office, they're probably the most well-known of the individuals in the executive office of the president because we see him or her speaking on behalf of the president. And I'm looking at the young lady who is, I keep wanting to say Speaker of the House, but it's not Speaker of the House. It's not Speaker of the House. It's the press secretary, and I do not remember her name. I feel ashamed that I don't remember her name, but I do not remember her name right now. And so that's probably the most widely known person in the executive office of the president. There are a number of other offices that are responsible for helping maintain our government and the White House. For the president, we have the White House Military Office. They're responsible for services ranging from the Air Force One to the dining facilities. We have the Office of Presidential Advance. They're responsible for preparing sites remote from the White House, in preparation for the president's arrival for sites other than the White House. So those are some other offices that help make the president's life a little bit easier and help support the daily operations and happenings for the president and him or her fulfilling their duties. We also have the cabinet, which is an advisory body. The advisory body to the president is made up of 15 executive departments, and they're all called secretaries, like the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Interior. All of those heads of the departments are either appointed by the president or they are confirmed by the Senate. I do want to talk about those departments, but I'm going to do it next week. So next week, we're going to talk more about the Electoral College. I'm going to talk more about local and state government, and I'm going to talk about the 15 executive offices that support the president. Okay. See if I want to say anything else about that. Yes, I do. It is important for us to know that there is like a chain of command or an order of succession for those individuals that rule over, the United States of America. So we know the president is in charge. The vice president will be the next person in charge. The the Speaker of the House is the next person in charge. Then we have the Senate President pro tempore, who is the next person in charge. And then the cabinet leads, the cabinet officers, they will be next in charge based on the order in which that department was created. So the longer that department has been in existence, those individuals would be like next in line if something happens to president, vice president, Speaker of the House, the Speaker of the House pro tempore. Or excuse me, let me say that right. The president, vice president, Speaker of the House, or the Senate president pro tempore. So those individuals or those leaders of the cabinet offices would be next in line. I think that's all I want to say right now about the executive branch. I'll share more information next week talking about the departments. And so that's all I think that I want to share with us tonight, you all. It has been a pleasure sharing the information about the 3 executive branches of government. I'm hoping that I presented the information in a clear, concise way for you to understand. If I didn't, let me know so that I can do better, be better, and live better. You can add it to the live chat. You can add it to the comment section. I don't mind taking constructive criticism so that I can continue to improve on the information that I'm sharing, the research that I'm doing, and the presentation that I'm giving to you. Because I do want to provide you with right information. That's why sometimes I have to fact check myself right then, because sometimes I am not reading the notes that I've made in a way that is understandable. So I want to make sure that I get it right. And it's just best for me to read what I wrote. Sometimes I try to just go off and try to put my words in my own words instead of reading the words that I've already established. Or if I'm, getting research information, reading the information that has already been established by that news outlet or wherever the research is coming from. And so thank you all for joining me tonight. For the 3rd time next week, we'll talk more about the Electoral College. I'll give you more information about the executive branch, including the 15 executive offices, and I'll share information about our local and our state government. To me, local and state government, that's where the voting power is, y'all. Our county commissioners, our city officials, our mayor, the sheriff, our county sheriff, like that's where the voting power is, y'all. That's what we need to make sure we're voting in every election that comes about, the primaries as well as the presidential election and all of the other races that are happening during that presidential election time. I want to remind you all to check your voter registration, make sure it's active. Check if you haven't registered to vote, go ahead and register to vote. The DMV will help you. Your state board of elections will help you. Your local board of elections will help you get registered to vote and make a plan to vote. Y'all get registered to vote and make a plan so that you can either early vote or vote day of November 5th, day of election. If you already registered to vote, check your registration regularly to ensure that you remain active and go ahead and get out and vote early if you choose to do that, or wait for November 5th election day. I do have information, and if I have the time, you all, I'll share it next Thursday. If I don't have the time next Thursday, I'll share it soon. The information about early voting in all the states and all the 50 states. I think I do have that information saved somewhere, and I'll pull it up and be able to share that with you sometime soon. I think I don't think we have a 5th Thursday in September. Let me just look and see. And we do not. So I may, if I'm taking too long next week with the information I said I'm going to share with you, then I will get it in our Let's Talk About It Bible edition on October 3rd. So I'm not going to be I'm not going to be leading October, let me say it right. I'm not going to be leading the Stephanie Humphrey channel on the Stephanie Humphrey channel in October. We actually have a special guest that's going to be coming. I'll announce that special guest next week. So I guess I'm going to have to try to get it all in next week on the 26th, y'all. So let me go ahead and let you know in advance. The 26th, 26 Sip and Say with Stephanie might be long. It might be 2+ hours, you all, but I may go ahead and get you the information for the 50 states so that you can have the information for early voting. If I don't get the information, then I'll maybe create a web page or add it to the description. I'll do something so that you can have that information for your state. You can always check it yourself on your state board of elections. There is a wealth of information and resources on your state board of elections website. I encourage you to check that regularly. Check to see if there's any information about voter laws in your state, or even if they've been active voter laws over the last couple of years. Make sure you have that information so that you have no issues when you go to vote, okay? Go ahead and do the research now so that you can participate in early voting, or so that you can prepare to vote on November 5th. Y'all make a plan to vote. Decide how you're going to vote, where you're going to vote, when you're going to vote. Decide if you're going to take your family with you, your friends, your community. Go ahead and make a plan so that you can cast your ballot, and make sure that you are not only researching our presidential candidates, Democratic, Republican, Libertarian. I want to say all of them. So let me get my paper because I do have it right here so I can see who else. So Green Party, Constitution Party, and the Justice for All Party. Make sure that you are researching the candidates so that you know who you want to vote for. President, make sure that you are researching the candidates that are running in the other races that are happening during this election cycle. Just do your research, y'all. Do your research and vote for the candidates that you feel will best lead in your local government, in the state at the state level, and then at the federal level. Okay, vote your conviction. Okay, just vote, and vote your conviction. Okay, that is all, you all. Look, I forgot to push the writ of cert. I forgot to push that, so I'm just now pushing it. So you're going to get that in the live chat late. But I do appreciate and thank you again for joining the Stephanie Humphrey channel and the Stephanie Humphrey broadcast. Again, Be Free Ministries, we are sponsoring the Aunties Against Abuse Health and Wellness event. Go to auntiesagainst.abuse.org to get more information about that. Be Free Ministries is hosting the Pocketbook Exchange Fellowship on October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We would love to have you join us on the 3rd and 4th right here on the Stephanie Humphrey channel and the Stephanie Humphrey podcast on the 3rd and 4th at 7 p.m. Our theme is On the Move, and everybody is welcome on the 3rd and the 4th. And on the 5th is our ladies only Saturday sessions. Our sessions include Moving Aside, Moving Forward, and Moving Beyond, you all. Those Saturday sessions are at 9:30 a.m. Go to BeFreeMinistriesNC.org, click 2024 Exchange or 2024 Fellowship. I'm not sure how I labeled it, but click that tab, get the information about the Pocketbook Exchange Fellowship. We look forward to seeing you there. Registration for the Pocketbook Exchange Fellowship is absolutely free. I just encourage you to register so I'm prepared for you for your arrival. Going back to the Aunties Health and Wellness events, all of those wellness events are absolutely free for young ladies ages 5 to 18. We would love to have your daughter, your niece, your cousin, your sister, whoever is a young lady in your family, in your community, ages 5 to 18, we would love to have them. All the events are virtual and they are open to every county, every state, every country, okay? Young ladies ages 5 to 18 are welcome to join us, okay? All right, y'all. Thank you for joining me for Sip and Say with Stephanie. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday, September 26th, right here on the Stephanie Humphrey channel and Stephanie Humphrey podcast at 6:35 p.m. sharp. Just in case I don't make 6:35 p.m. sharp. I will see you there. You all be blessed and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Take care.